I held my son close, the weight of our banishment pressing down on us both. My husband had handed me the divorce papers that very night, severing all ties as if we were strangers. I looked at my 9-year-old boy and promised him, no matter what, I would keep him safe. But when dawn broke and it was time to leave, I discovered my son had been replaced. My heart lurched in panic, a cold dread coiling in my chest. Then, out of nowhere, strange lines of text flickered before my eyes, like a ghostly script written on the air itself. Here it comes. The male lead bought a beggar kid who looks 5% like his son for 50 silver coins. The real son was sent off to enjoy life with his white moonlight first love, this cannon fodder ex-wife insists on finding her real son, but he ends up hating her for dragging him down. He resents her for the rest of his life, after the male lead and his white moonlight rise to the top, this cannon fodder ex-wife conveniently dies of illness. Pretty tragic, wait, this beggar kid is the abandoned heir of the deposed crown prince, the future emperor. I stood frozen for a moment, the words searing into my mind. Then, I bent down to the child before me, bruised, battered, and trembling, and reached out my hand. Abao, dawn has broken. Come with your mother. 01. The child froze, his eyes rimmed with red. He hesitated, then timidly grasped my hand. Mother. I tightened my grip on his ice-cold fingers, offering no explanation. More eerie text drifted across my vision. Why isn't this cannon fodder ex-wife following the script? Shouldn't she be making a scene, demanding to find her real son, he only looks 5% like her son. She really didn't recognize him. What a fool, no wonder the male lead divorced her. Too dull, too slow. I lowered my gaze, my heart feeling as if it were being sliced by a dull blade over and over. I had raised my son for 9 years. How could I not recognize him? But, since my husband and my son had both chosen that path of wealth and status, why should I force things? A year ago, my father was still the prime minister. He defended the deposed crown prince, angering the emperor, and was exiled 3,000 li to the northern frontier. The emperor initially punished only him, but my father, restless even in exile, submitted 3 memorials pleading for the crown prince's reinstatement. The emperor's fury was absolute. A decree ordered me and my son to join the exile. I was granted the privilege of traveling without chains, but my husband, Shen Jiaocheng, a minister of rights, handed me the divorce papers that very night. Zai, my career is clear. You can no longer help me. Don't drag me down. Each word was like ice, cutting to the bone. I turned back into the room, boiled water, and began to wash the child. He was filthy, his thin clothes barely covering ribs that jutted out. His back was crisscrossed with fresh and old scars, a sight that made my breath catch. More comments scrolled by. This kid is the deposed crown prince's orphan. His name is Pei Che, before the crown prince was placed under house arrest, he entrusted his son to a loyal follower, but the follower was killed, and the boy became a beggar. He's had a terrible life. My breath hitched for a moment, then, I kept my face calm and continued, dressing him in the old clothes my son Shen Jiaoyang had left behind. They were a bit too big, but still better than the rags he wore. I studied him, though thin and gaunt. His features bore a 5% resemblance to my Jiaoyang. At dawn, I led Pei Che to the city gate. A donkey cart was waiting, but we ran into the one person I least wanted to see. Shen Jiaocheng stood in a brand new brocade robe beside a lavish carriage. Next to him stood Qingping County Princess, dripping in jewels, and Shen Jiaoyang clung tightly to the princess's skirt, hiding behind her. He didn't even look at me. Shen Jiaocheng spotted me, frowned, and walked over. Zai, you're wise to know this is best for a bow. Don't cause trouble. Go quietly to your place of exile. It's better for everyone. My nails dug deep into my palms. I lowered my head and smiled at Pei Che beside me, my voice soft. A bow, let's go. Behind me, Zhaoyan's clear voice rang out. Mother. My body stiffened. Then I realized he wasn't calling for me. Mother, when are we going to the treasure pavilion to shop? He was calling Qingping County Princess Mother. I didn't turn back, I just tightened my grip on Pei Che's hand. He looked up at me, said nothing, and squeezed my hand even harder. Strange, this cannon fodder ex-wife really seems different. 02 The donkey cart jolted along the official road. I held Pei Che close, shielding him from the wind. His body was stiff, unmoving. Our Bao is your nickname. Remember that. The small body in my arms trembled slightly. He looked up, his eyes red, and nodded firmly. This child was startlingly perceptive. During a rest stop, he actively gathered firewood, moving with practiced ease. I lit the fire, and he silently broke the dry rations into small pieces, offering them to me on a leaf. Mother, eat first. His voice still carried a child's innocence, but his tone was steady and mature. Comments drifted by. This kid is 100 times more sensible than her real son, the deposed crown prince personally taught him. He could recite the Analects at 3. What a waste. I took the food, my heart aching. Just then, more text appeared before my eyes. The female lead is feeding Xinjiaoyang pastries right now, so doting, she's complaining to her confidant that childbirth is too painful. She doesn't want to go through it. The male lead conveniently sent his son over, a freebie. How convenient, The male lead spoils the female lead too much, fetching tea, pouring water. I closed my eyes. Back then, Shen Jiaocheng was a poor scholar. My father appreciated his talent and took him in. We met, we married, a year ago. My father was convicted and exiled. That's when he met Qingping County Princess. He began to find me dull and rigid. He found my family's influence weak. I was inferior to the princess in every way. That night, we stayed in a crude roadside inn. Pei Che fell asleep quickly, but his little brows were still furrowed. I couldn't sleep at all. Suddenly, the comments flashed wildly. Whoa, the female lead sent people to teach the female supporting character a lesson, they want her to have an accident on the road, preferably die of illness. They're almost at the inn. My heart tightened, a chill rising from within. I immediately shook Pei Che gently. Bao, wake up. He opened his eyes almost instantly. His dark pupils held no drowsiness, only sharp alertness. There are bad people. We have to leave now. My words came fast. He didn't ask a single question. He got up nimbly and helped me quickly pack our simple belongings. We led the donkey cart, silently slipping away from the inn, and veered onto a rough, winding path in the dark. Comments scrolled. Damn, this female supporting character is pretty clever and alert. She actually dodged it, I'm starting to respect this cannon fodder ex-wife, the Prime Minister's daughter. After all, not an easy target. I breathed a sigh of relief and kept driving the cart. After who knows how long, Pei Che's steps began to falter. I stopped, lifted him onto the cart, and let him lean against me. He was so sleepy his eyelids were drooping, but he still forced himself to stay awake half conscious. A small hand grabbed the corner of my clothes, murmuring like a dream, "Mother, when I grow up, I'll protect you." My throat tightened. I pulled his thin shoulders closer. All right, 03. After months of trudging, we finally reached the desolate exile grounds of the northern frontier. Father lived in 2 dilapidated earthen huts, hoeing the ground in the yard. When he saw me, the hoe in his hand clattered to the ground with a bang. His aged face flushed red, his lips trembling. "Zai. Father has failed you, dragged you down." I shook my head, gently nudging Pei Che forward from behind me. Father's gaze fell on the child. He studied him closely, tears glistening in his eyes. "Bao, you've grown so big, thin, suffering." He reached out to touch Pei Che's head. Pei Che instinctively shifted slightly. Looking at me, I grasped his cold little hand and smiled at father. "Father, Shen Jiaocheng gave me the divorce papers. From now on, it's just the 3 of us, living as a family." Father paused, then let out a long sigh. He crouched down and said warmly to Pei Che, "Come, Bao, let your maternal grandfather take a look." A barrage of comments floated by. "The old chancellor still doesn't know his grandson has been swapped. Poor guy, but if he found out his real grandson recognized someone else as his mother, he'd be furious." Life settled into a routine. Father picked up his books again, personally teaching Pei Che to read. He soon discovered that this child not only had a photographic memory but could also draw inferences from one instance occasionally. The insights Pei Che offered even made father pause to ponder. A prodigy, a heaven-sent genius. Father stroked his beard, a long-lost light shining in his eyes. Pei Che sat quietly, writing stroke by stroke. Pei Che really is the future emperor. His IQ is off the charts, if the old man knew this was a royal grandson, he'd probably upgrade his teaching to imperial tutor level on the spot. I reclaimed the wasteland behind the house and planted cold-resistant vegetables. After Pei Che finished writing, he would crouch by the stove and help me light the fire when I washed clothes. He silently brought a small stool when I mended clothes. He brought warm water. The comments gradually shifted. The female supporting character's life here is more comfortable than in the capital, I actually think the male lead is ungrateful, looking down on such a gentle Lady Han. Their address for me changed from cannon fodder ex-wife to Lady Han. I twitched the corner of my mouth that day. The comments stirred up again. The male lead officially married the Qingping commandery princess today. Quite the grand affair, The real son was taken by the commandery princess under a different identity and recognized as her own son, a happy family of 3, completely forgetting about Lady Han. I was sewing clothes when the needle pricked my finger. A bead of blood welled up. Pei Che appeared before me. Without warning, handing me a handkerchief, his dark eyes filled with concern. Mother, does it hurt? I took the handkerchief, shook my head, and smiled at him. It doesn't hurt. The comments paused for a moment, then burst out again. The emperor hasn't been well lately, always dreaming of the deposed crown prince, Back then, the deposed crown prince was blamed because the 5th prince tried to assassinate the emperor. During the protection, the crown prince struck too hard and crippled the 5th prince. The emperor scolded him for lacking brotherly love and deposed him, Actually, the emperor regretted it afterward, just couldn't swallow his pride. My sewing slowed down. I was lost in thought. A year passed. Pei Che had grown taller, his gaze growing more serene. Father poured out all his knowledge, and Pei Che absorbed it rapidly. One day, I was watching him practice calligraphy. The comments exploded without warning. Urgent news. The crown prince has died of illness. The emperor was so heartbroken he vomited blood, The emperor decrees the restoration of the crown prince, So now the key is to find the royal grandson. The commander of the embroidered uniform guard is personally leading the search, The male lead, Shen Jiaocheng, is ordered to accompany them. They're coming to the exile grounds to find the child. The ruler in my hand clattered onto the paper. Pei Che looked up, his clear eyes questioning. Mother, what's wrong? I took a deep breath, crouched down to meet his gaze. Chea, you're 10 now, a little man. Remember every word, every character your maternal grandfather taught you this past year and more. No matter what happens, Mother is by your side. He looked at me, as if reading the stormy tension in my eyes. Then, he nodded solemnly. Mother, I remember. 04 2 months later, the sound of hooves shattered the quiet of the desolate village. Shen Jiaocheng dismounted. He wore a brand new official robe, a jade belt at his waist, much more respectable than a year ago. Seeing me weeding in the vegetable patch, a flicker of feigned pity crossed his eyes. Zai, it's only been a year, and you've fallen to this state. Zhao Yang followed behind him, dressed in silk, plump and fair. He looked at me, his gaze unfamiliar and complex. I stood up, brushing the dirt off my hands. I'm doing very well, Lord Shen. Is there something you need? Shen Jiaocheng stepped closer, lowering his voice. Zai, back then, the divorce was forced on me. The commandery princess is domineering. Zhao Yang and I haven't had an easy time. His eyes reddened. I still miss you. The comments scrolled wildly. OL, the male lead gets bullied by the commandery princess and comes to his ex-wife for comfort, I heard the princess scolds him daily for living off a woman, and his own son despises him for being useless, no cure for regret. I watched his performance calmly. When he finished, I spoke, my voice flat and unruffled. Lord Shen, you wrote the divorce papers with your own hand. The path was your choice. It has nothing to do with me. Shen Jiaocheng's face stiffened. Just then, Shen Jiaoyang suddenly spoke, his voice crisp. Mother, come back to the capital with me. The commandery princess mother said you can enter the mansion as a maid. She'll give you food. His tone was innocent, but the words cut deep. A sharp pain stabbed my heart. Before I could respond, a voice came from behind. Mother, Pei Che walked out carrying a basin of water. Shun Zhaoqing's face darkened as he looked him up and down. Is this that little beggar from back then? He turned to me, his tone harsh. Zai, have you lost your mind? Your son is standing right in front of you, and you've taken in a little beggar as your own. Do you have no shame toward Zhao Yang? I stepped in front of Pei Che. Lord Shun, you've mistaken him. This is my son. Shun Zhaoyang grew frantic. He's not me, I'm your son. Scene start. The air grew thick with tension as the words hung in the void, sharp and cutting. He's panicking now. Isn't he, the biological son? If only he had thought of that before. Pei Che suddenly spoke. His voice was clear and crisp, carrying no fear, no flattery, just the steady truth of a boy who had nothing to hide. Honorable sir, he said, addressing the official directly, my mother told me she only has one son. And that son is me. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. Please take this young master and leave. Shun Zhaoqing's face flushed a deep, ugly purple, the color of rage and humiliation mixed together. A grown man, a court official, silenced by a child. How dare you? He roared, his voice cracking with fury. A lowly beggar dares to talk back to an imperial officer. You have no manners, no upbringing. His hand shot up, aiming straight for Pei Che's face, ready to strike. You wouldn't dare, I shouted, lunging forward and grabbing his descending wrist with all my strength. He snarled, yanking his arm free with brutal force, sending me stumbling backward. I nearly fell, but Pei Che was there, his small hands steadying me, his body a shield between me and the storm. Shun Zhaoqing's face was a mask of iron fury. He turned to the guards behind him, his voice a whip crack. What are you standing there for? Tie up this bastard child, throw him into the mountains, let him rot there, away from my son's sight. Yes, sir. Two guards lunged forward, their hands reaching for Pei Che. Pei Che pressed his lips together tightly, refusing to cry out, refusing to scream. But his eyes, those bright, black eyes, filled with tears in an instant. He held them back, stubborn, proud, unwilling to let them fall. Let him go. I threw myself forward, trying to block them, but a guard shoved me aside with brutal indifference. I hit the ground hard, the impact jarring through my bones. Mother! Pei Che finally cried out, struggling against their grip, his voice breaking through the silence like a blade. The barrage of comments exploded across the screen, a chorus of panic and rage. Shun Zhaoqing, have you lost your mind? Do you even know who you're tying up? Where's the commander? Commander Pei, come out now. I can't take this. My heart is pounding. The guards had Pei Che's arms twisted behind his back, the boy's face pale with pain, his jaw clenched against the agony. Stop. A single command, sharp as a thunderclap, cut through the chaos. Pei Yun, commander of the embroidered uniform guard, sat astride his horse, his flying fish robe billowing, his embroidered spring knife hanging at his waist. He was also the late deposed crown prince's cousin. Shun Zhaoqing's rage evaporated the moment he saw him, replaced by a forced, disdainful smile. Commander Pei, what perfect timing, he said, his tone dripping with false courtesy. Just dealing with a beggar. Sorry to trouble you. But Pei Yun didn't even glance at him. His gaze was locked on Pei Che's face, the boy still held by the guards, yet standing straight, unbowed, unbroken. Pei Yun dismounted in one fluid motion, striding over until he stood before the child. Then he knelt, lowering himself to Pei Che's eye level, his breath suddenly ragged and uneven. Pei Che met his gaze then, softly, almost a whisper, the boy spoke, "Uncle." Pei Yun's entire body trembled. He dropped to his knees, his voice shaking as he declared, "Your subordinate pays respects to His Highness, the grandson of the Crown Prince." 05. The words grandson of the Crown Prince fell like a thunderbolt, shattering the silence. Shun Zhaoqing's face drained of all color, his knees giving way as he swayed, barely standing. His lips moved, but no sound came out. He could only watch, frozen, as Pei Yun knelt before the beggar boy with the deepest reverence. The guards behind him released Pei Che in terror, dropping to their knees in a chorus of thuds. Pei Che rubbed his shoulder where it had been twisted, but he didn't cry, he didn't panic, he just stood there, looking at the kneeling commander. Then Slowly, he turned his head toward me, his eyes asked the question, "Mother, what should I do?" I gave a small nod, only then did he speak, "Commander Pei, please rise." His voice still carried the innocence of a child, but his tone was steady, calm, nothing like a 10-year-old boy. Pei Yun looked up, his eyes rimmed with red, his voice hoarse, "Your Highness has suffered. I came too late." He rose to his feet, his gaze sweeping over the two guards who had laid hands on the prince, his eyes turned cold, sharp as ice. "Who touched him?" The two guards collapsed to the ground, trembling like leaves in a storm. "Our report, Commander, it was us." Pei Yun drew his embroidered spring knife without a word, a flash of cold steel. Two screams rang out almost as one. Two fingers fell to the ground, blood splattering across the dirt. "Striking a superior," Pei Yun said, sheathing his blade, his voice as calm as if he were commenting on the weather. "By law, punishable by death, but since you acted in ignorance, 1 finger each. Let this be a warning." The guards writhed on the ground, clutching their severed fingers, their cries muffled by fear. Shen Jiaocheng watched it all, his composure crumbling. His legs gave out, and he collapsed to the ground, his face ashen, his eyes hollow. "Grandson of the Crown Prince," he muttered, his voice barely a whisper. Then, suddenly, he twisted toward me, a desperate, frantic hope blazing in his eyes. Zai, say something for me. I didn't know." I thought he was just a beggar." He crawled toward me, reaching for the hem of my skirt. I stepped back, avoiding his grasp. "Lord Shen," I said, my voice flat, emotionless, "just a moment ago, you called him a lowly beggar and wanted to throw him to the wolves in the mountains." I paused, letting the silence stretch. "Isn't it a little late to change your story now?" Shen Jiaocheng's face flushed red, then purple, then a sickly pale, his lips trembled, but no words came. Shen Jiaoyang stood nearby, watching it all with wide, confused eyes. He didn't understand why the beggar boy his father had called an impostor was suddenly a royal grandson. "Father," he called out, his voice small and uncertain. No one answered him. Pei Yun turned to me, bowing with a respect far deeper than he had ever shown Shen Jiaocheng. "Madam Han, for the past year and more, you have raised His Highness with kindness. On behalf of the late Crown Prince, I thank you." I shook my head. "A bow is my son, there is no debt of gratitude." A flicker of surprise crossed Pei Yun's eyes, and he bowed even deeper. "His Majesty has decreed that the grandson of the Crown Prince shall return to the capital. Please, Madam Han and His Highness, prepare your belongings. We depart immediately." I looked down at Pei Che. He looked up at me, his small hand reaching out, his fingers wrapping tightly around mine. "If Mother goes, I go." I knelt, straightening his collar, and smiled. "All right, Mother will go with you." The comments exploded across the screen. That Mother made me cry. Rivers, Madam Han is so fierce. Shen Jiaocheng's face is disgusting, Commander Pei is so handsome. I've watched that finger-cutting scene 100 times, the biological son is standing there like an outsider. TSK, picked the wrong side, didn't he, Did anyone else notice? Pei Che looked at Han Zai before speaking. "This mother-son bond is killing me." Shen Jiaocheng lay sprawled on the ground, watching us pack. Then, as if struck by a sudden thought, he scrambled to his feet and rushed toward me. "Zai, the divorce papers don't count. I was forced by Qingping. I've always had you in my heart." Pei Yun's embroidered spring knife flashed, its tip stopping a hair's breadth from Shen Jiaocheng's throat. "Lord Shen," Pei Yun said, his voice cold as steel, "please show some self-respect." The blade hovered. A silver promise of death. Shen Jiaocheng froze, sweat trickling down his temple, his breath caught in his throat. Scene END. I took one last look at the earthen house, where I had lived for over a year, grasped Pei Che's hand, and walked toward the carriage without looking back. Behind me, Shen Jiaoyan's voice rang out, "Father, where are they going? Why does that little beggar get to ride in the big carriage?" Shen Jiaocheng did not answer, or rather, he could no longer speak as the carriage started moving. Pei Che leaned against me, his small hand still clutching my fingers. "Mother," he suddenly said softly, "from now on, I'll protect you, just like the naive promise he made on the donkey cart over a year ago, but this time, I knew he meant it. The final line of bullet comments drifted across the screen. The gears of fate begin to turn from this moment onward. 06. The carriage traveled along the official road, moving several times faster than when we had come. Along the way, horses were exchanged at post stations, and the embroidered uniform guard escorted us front and back, a grand and imposing procession. Pei Che leaned against the carriage wall, holding a book in his hands, but he hadn't turned a single page for a long time. I knew his mind wasn't on it, but I didn't call him out. I just quietly stayed by his side as dusk fell. The convoy stopped at a post station. Pei Yun personally came to invite us. Your Highness, Lady Han, please disembark and rest. After we had eaten, Pei Yun knocked and entered. He had changed into plain clothes, but still wore a blade at his waist, his brow carrying a hint of melancholy. General has some words I wish to speak with your Highness alone. I glanced at Pei Che, and he nodded. Mother will be right here, not going anywhere. I patted his head, stood up, and walked to the outer room. The door wasn't fully closed, leaving a crack. Pei Yun's voice came from inside, low and restrained. Your Highness, do you still remember the former crown prince? There was a moment of silence before Pei Che's voice rang out. I remember some things. Father taught me to recite the analects, taught me to ride a pony. He liked to lift me onto his shoulders and run around the courtyard. His voice was very soft, as if afraid to disturb something. Pei Yun's breathing grew heavier. He recounted the events of that year. One by one, the fifth prince attempted to assassinate the emperor, the former crown prince. In protecting his majesty, struck too hard and crippled the fifth prince. In a fit of rage, the emperor denounced him for lacking brotherly love, deposed him as crown prince, and confined him to his residence. His majesty regretted it afterward, but as a sovereign, he couldn't bring himself to back down. Later, the former crown prince fell into depression and died in confinement. Pei Yun's voice choked with emotion. On his deathbed, he was still waiting for an imperial pardon from his majesty. The room fell silent for a long time. Pei Che's voice rang out again, carrying a composure beyond his years. So, grandfather is calling me back out of guilt. Pei Yun hesitated. Your Highness, I understand. Pei Che interrupted him. But I'm not going back for his guilt. Father taught me to read, taught me how to be a man, taught me to be worthy of the people of this world. If going back can make life better for the common folk, then I'll go. Pei Yun was silent for a long moment before he spoke hoarsely. Your Highness is virtuous and benevolent. The former crown prince, if he knows in heaven, will surely be comforted. Bullet comments scrolled by. The deposed crown prince was so tragic, driven to death by his own father, Pei Che is only 10 years old. His awareness is stronger than most adults, that's why suffering makes one mature early. This child is just too heartbreaking. When Pei Yun came out from the inner room, he glanced at me, seeming to want to say something but holding back. I understood his meaning. Commander Pei, if you have something to say, speak plainly. He paused for a moment, then lowered his voice. Lady Han, once His Highness returns to the capital and is restored to the imperial lineage, your bond as mother and son may be hard to continue. Royal blood could not be confused. I had already considered this possibility, but my heart still felt as if something had clenched it tightly. I know, but I promised him, no matter what happens, I'll be by his side. Pei Yun looked at me, a new respect in his eyes. Lady Han is a woman of great integrity. General admires you. He turned to leave, then suddenly stopped, not looking back. The Qingping Commandery Princess has already gotten word in the capital and is making moves everywhere. Shen Jiaocheng has already rushed back to the capital overnight. I was momentarily stunned, then understood he was hurrying back to discuss countermeasures. Bullet comments exploded. Damn. Shen Jiaocheng ran faster than a rabbit, Qingping Commandery Princess must be panicking now. She sent people to harm Han Zai, just wait for this pair of scumbags to meet their end, Commander Pei is reminding Lady Han to be careful. What a good man. That night, Pei Che lay beside me, his small hand gripping the edge of my clothes, just like when he was little. Mother, he said with his eyes closed, his voice drowsy. I remember everything Uncle said. But what I remember most clearly is what you said. Which one? The sky is bright. Follow mother. He burrowed closer into my arms, his voice growing softer. Back then, I thought I was going to be sold again. I never expected that I would really have a mother. My eyes burned. And I held him tighter. Silly child. Would mother lie to you? He didn't say anything more. His breathing gradually evened out, and he fell asleep. The last line of bullet comments drifted by. No matter what happens when they return to the capital, no one can tear this mother and son apart. 07. The capital, the imperial palace, the vermilion palace gates slowly opened before us. Like a giant beast baring its jaws, Pei Che stood at my side, his small hand clenched tightly, but his face showed no trace of nervousness. Pei Yun led the way, guiding us through layers of palace halls. Eunuchs and maids knelt on the ground all around. The crown prince's eldest grandson returns to the palace. Sharp, high-pitched voices carried the announcement inward, one after another, spreading like ripples through the entire palace. Outside the Hall of Mental Cultivation, Chief Eunuch Li Dequan personally came out to greet us, his eyes red-rimmed. Your Highness, His Majesty has been waiting for you for a long time. The palace doors swung open, and a heavy smell of medicine rushed out. On the dragon couch, the old emperor leaned against a soft pillow, gaunt and haggard, a shadow of the man he had been a year ago. The moment he saw Pei Che, tears suddenly welled up in his clouded eyes. Chea, his voice trembled. Barely audible, Pei Che stood still, looking at this grandfather he had never met. He did not move. I gently pushed his back. Go on. He turned back to look at me, then slowly walked over. Stopping before the couch, following the etiquette Pei Yun had taught him, he performed a grand bow. Your grandson, Pei Che, pays respects to grandfather. The old emperor stretched out his withered hand, trembling as he touched Pei Che's face. So much like the crown prince. The old emperor's tears streamed down his deeply lined face. My Chea, these years, you've suffered so much. Pei Che knelt there, his back ramrod straight. He did not cry. Instead, he spoke softly. Grandson has not suffered. The old emperor wrapped his arms around him and wailed aloud. The entire hall of palace attendants bowed their heads, wiping away tears. Even Pei Yun turned his face aside. I stood at the entrance of the hall, quietly watching this scene. In my heart, I could not name the feeling, joy for Pei Che, and sorrow for him too. He had finally returned to the place he was meant to be, yet he had also forever bid farewell to those simple days on the donkey cart, when he said, "Mother, I will protect you." The old emperor wept for a long time before gradually calming down. Only then did he notice me. His gaze fell upon my coarse cloth garments. You are Han Zai. I bent my knees in a formal bow. Your humble subject Han Zai pays respects to your majesty. The old emperor scrutinized me carefully, then nodded. I have heard that for over a year now. It was you who protected Chea. Your father, Prime Minister Han, also risked his life to defend the crown prince because, he sighed, his tone complex, the people of the Han family are all loyal and steadfast. Your Majesty flatters me, I said, lowering my head. A bow. His Highness is my son. Protecting him is my duty. A flicker of surprise passed through the old emperor's eyes. Son, Pei Che suddenly spoke. Imperial grandfather, she is my mother. His voice was not loud, but it was exceptionally firm. The old emperor was silent for a moment, then suddenly laughed, a bitter smile tinged with sorrow. Good, Chea has such a heart. I am relieved. He looked at Li Dequan. Pass my decree. The imperial grandson shall temporarily reside in the Eastern Palace, with all provisions according to the crown prince's regulations. The Han woman, he paused, grant her residence in Changchun Palace, to be arranged separately. Pei Che immediately said, Imperial grandfather, I wish for my mother to live closer. The old emperor was taken aback, then burst into hearty laughter. All right, as you wish, as you wish. Let her live in the Eastern Palace's side hall. How about that? Only then did Pei Che look satisfied. He turned his head and gave me a faint smile. The barrage flooded the screen. The old emperor's attitude clearly treats Han Zai as a benefactor now, Pei Che is too smooth. Claiming his mother right away, this solidifies his position, I bet Shen Zhaocheng is jumping with anxiety outside the palace. Ha ha ha. Meanwhile, outside the palace gates, Shen Zhaocheng had changed into a half-worn official robe, standing in the cold wind. Already waiting for 2 hours, he wanted to enter, but was stopped by the guards. Your subordinate is the imperial grandson's foster father, he said with a flattering smile. I beg you to pass on a message. The guard's face was expressionless. His Majesty has summoned only the imperial grandson and Han Zai. No one else may enter. Shen Zhaocheng's face turned ugly, but he dared not lash out. He could only continue standing in the wind, waiting in his heart. He knew clearly that this wait was not for a message, but for fate. The last line of the barrage floated by. Foster father, who was it that threw them out with their own hands back then? Now you want to cling. Too late. 08 3 days later, 3 imperial edicts were issued in succession. The first, in Fef, the imperial grandson Pei Che as the imperial grand heir, to take residence in the Eastern Palace, with a grand ceremony to be held on a chosen day. The second, posthumously in Fef, the deposed crown prince as the mourning crown prince, rebuild his tomb, and rebury him with the rights of a crown prince. The third edict shook the entire court. By the mandate of heaven, the emperor decrees, Han Zai, daughter of the prime minister, virtuous and virtuous, has merit in raising the imperial grandson. Specially grant her the title of first-class honored lady, with the ceremonial honors of a princess, bestow 1,000 taels of gold, 100 bolts of fine silk. Her father, Han Huayuan, loyal and commendable, shall be reinstated to his original post. With his mansion returned, I knelt on the cold stone bricks, listening to the eunuch's sharp voice finish reading the edict, still somewhat dazed. First-class honored lady, princess ceremonial honors, father reinstated to his post. This favor was too heavy. Lady Han, receive the edict, Li Dequan said with a beaming smile, offering the decree with both hands. His Majesty said, this is what you deserve. I took it with both hands, kowtowing in thanks. The barrage had gone wild. First class, princess honors. Oh my God, what a stunning comeback, from a convict to a first-class honored lady. Han Zai did it in just 2 years, Shen Zhaocheng must be regretting it so much his intestines are green. Ha 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 ha, What expression does the Qingping commandery princess have now? I want to see. Capital city, commandery princess mansion. Xiao Wanrong smashed a floor full of porcelain. First-class honored lady, she's a convicted criminal. What right does she have? Maids and old servants knelt all around, none daring to utter a word. Shen Zhaocheng sat in the corner, his face ashen, silent. Xiao Wanrong rushed over, pointing at his nose and cursing. It's all your fault. If you hadn't severed ties with her back then, would it have come to this? Shen Zhaocheng finally couldn't hold back. He stood up abruptly. It was you who forced me to divorce her. You said it was either her or me, and I chose you. Now you blame me. You, and also, Shen Zhaocheng said coldly, looking at her, you're sending people to harm her on the road. Do you think it can be hidden? She's now His Majesty's favored one. If she mentions it before His Majesty, Xiao Wanrong's face instantly turned deathly pale. You're talking nonsense. I didn't. Whether you did or not, you know it yourself. Shen Zhaocheng shook his sleeves and turned to leave. At the door, he paused, his voice full of exhaustion and resentment. Wanrong, marrying you was the biggest mistake of my life. The door slammed shut. Xiao Wanrong collapsed to the ground, trembling all over. The barrage, dogs biting dogs, a mouthful of fur. Brilliant, the Qingping commandery princess is scared now. Too late, Shen Zhaocheng is starting to regret too. But does regret help? Eastern Palace, side hall. Pei Che finished his lessons, and the first thing he did was run over to me. Mother, he called out as soon as he entered, holding a scroll of books in his hand. I was sitting by the window, embroidering a handkerchief. I looked up at him. What's wrong? Running all sweaty. He put the book on the table and sat down next to me, just like in the northern frontier days. Today, the grand tutor taught from *Mencius*, saying, the people are the most important, the state comes next, and the ruler is the least. He looked up at me. Mother, I think father thought the same way back then. My heart softened. I put down the handkerchief and wiped his sweat for him. Your father was a good man, and you are a good man too. And what about mother? Mother is a good person too. He smiled, his eyes curving into crescents, showing a rare hint of childishness. The last line of the barrage floated by. This warmth, it's the real thing. Original Chinese text, 09. The welcome banquet was set at Hanliang Hall. By the edge of Tay Lake. This was Pei Chei's first formal appearance since returning to the capital. All the civil and military officials, nobles, and titled ladies were present. I changed into the supreme rank noblewoman's ceremonial robe, a deep blue, gold-threaded cloud-patterned gown, paired with a jade leather belt and a gold pendant. The reflection in the bronze mirror was a world apart from the woman who had been pulling weeds in a vegetable patch 2 years ago. Mother looks beautiful. Pei Chei stood beside me, his evaluation earnest. I smiled and pinched his cheek. You look beautiful today too. He wore the crown prince's ceremonial attire, a black robe embroidered with 5-clawed golden dragons, a 7-beam crown on his head. Young as he was, there was already a hint of majesty about him. Inside Hanliang Hall, cups clinked and laughter mingled. Pei Chei sat below the old emperor. I sat at the front of the ladies' section. The moment I settled into my seat, I felt countless eyes on me, some probing, some jealous, some fawning, and a few carrying a hint of mockery. Xiao Wanrong sat across from me, draped in a bright red gold-threaded robe, her hair piled high with pearls and jade. A proper smile graced her face, but knives hid in her eyes. Beside her sat Shen Zhaocheng, his complexion ashen, his gaze flickering nervously. Shen Zhaoyang sat on her other side, dressed in silk finery, idly playing with the fruit pits on the table. Occasionally, he lifted his head to glance at me, his eyes unfamiliar and tangled with emotion. After 3 rounds of wine, Xiao Wanrong suddenly rose, glass in hand, and walked over to me. Sister Han, she said, her face beaming, it's been so long. Let your little sister toast you. The word sister dripped with false warmth. I raised my glass, my tone indifferent. You're too kind, princess. Cheers. She lowered her voice, just enough for me alone to hear. Han Zai, don't think that getting a noble title makes you something. That son of yours, he calls me mother now. My hand, holding the glass, trembled slightly. She smirked with satisfaction. He eats my food, wears my clothes, and calls me mother so sweetly. The son you raised for 9 years, through all that hardship, is mine now. So tell me, who do you think won? The bullet comments exploded. Princess Qingping, have you no shame? Stealing someone's son and then bragging about it. What kind of trash is this? Lady Han, shut her down. I set down my glass, looked up at her, and spoke in a voice soft enough for only those nearby to hear. What the princess says is true. That son of mine does call you mother, but I smiled. The son I have now is the crown prince's heir. What is your son? Xiao Wanrong's smile froze instantly. The noble women around us covered their mouths, tittering softly. Their gazes swept over Xiao Wanrong, dripping with mockery. Her mouth opened, as if to retort, but a voice cut her off. Mother. Pei Chei had appeared beside me, his expression calm and unreadable. He looked at Xiao Wanrong, his gaze flat, as if she were nothing more than an insignificant stranger. Who is this? I held back a laugh. This is Princess Qingping. Pei Chei nodded, his tone neither servile nor arrogant. Greetings, Princess. My mother is not a heavy drinker. Allow me to take this cup on her behalf. With that, he took the glass from Xiao Wanrong's hand and downed it in one gulp. Xiao Wanrong's face cycled through shades of green and white. Her hand hung frozen in the air, unable to retract or stay the bullet comments. Ah, the crown prince's heir is so cool, only 10 years old and already protecting his mother like this. Imagine him grown up, Princess Qingping's face is green. Ha ha ha. Shen Zhaoyang suddenly ran over, tugging at Xiao Wanrong's skirt. Mother, I want to eat that. He pointed at a plate of fruit nearby. Xiao Wanrong shook him off, hissing under her breath. Eat what? Go sit back down. The force of her shove sent Shen Zhaoyang stumbling. He nearly fell. He stood there, frozen, his eyes reddening, lost and confused. I looked at him, a complex wave of emotion washing over me. This was my son, the one I carried for 10 months and raised for 9 years, but at this moment, standing before me, He felt like a stranger separated by 1,000 mountains and rivers. Pei Che glanced at him but said nothing. He simply took my hand. Mother, grandfather wants us to sit over there. I withdrew my gaze and nodded. As I turned, I heard Shen Zhaoyan's timid voice behind me. Mother, I didn't know who he was calling and I didn't look back. The last bullet comment floated across the screen. Some things, once lost, can never be picked up again. 10. The truth came to light in just 7 days. The Imperial Guard investigated and confirmed Princess Qingping had sent assassins to harm Han Zai, swapped the crown prince's heir, and falsely claimed royal lineage. The evidence was ironclad, each charge stacked like a mountain. To save himself, Shen Zhaocheng wrote a confession that very night, laying out all of Xiao Wanrong's crimes in full, and attached a letter of divorce. Your servant is irreconcilably opposed to Qingping. I beg your majesty to see clearly. He knelt in the Golden Throne Hall, weeping and wailing. All the civil and military officials looked on coldly. Not a single person spoke for him. The emperor hurled the confession in his face. And you still have the face to beg me? Who was it that personally sold the crown prince's heir like a beggar? Who allowed Qingping to harm Lady Han? I won't kill you. That is mercy enough. The imperial decree came down. Princess Qingping's title was stripped. She was to be confined for life, never to leave her residence. Shen Zhaocheng was stripped of his rank, exiled 3,000 li, and banned from ever returning to the capital. Shen Zhaoyang would be placed under the care of the imperial clan court, to be raised by a virtuous family, and forbidden from ever seeing Qingping or Shen Zhaocheng again. The bullet comments, Heaven's justice has a long cycle, Heaven's net is vast, but nothing escapes, Shen Zhaocheng exiled 3,000 li. Isn't that exactly what Lady Han suffered? Princess Qingping confined for life, serves her right, it's just a pity for Shen Zhaoyang. But he chose his own path, who's to blame? When the news reached me, I was sitting by the window of the Eastern Palace's side hall, embroidering a handkerchief. Pei Che returned from his lessons, changed his clothes, and, as always, settled down beside me. Mother, today, the Grand Tutor praised me. He said my policy essay was well written. I smiled at him. What did you write about? Filial piety, he said seriously. I said that filial piety is not about form, but about the heart. If someone is in your heart, even if they're far away, that's filial. If no one is in your heart, even if you pay respects every day, that's unfilial. My heart stirred. I set down the handkerchief and looked at him. He suddenly grabbed my hand, his small face tense with determination. Mother, I will come to see you every day from now on. I know. I ruffled his hair. The crisp spring air carried the scent of blooming flowers through the window, but the warmth in my chest was far more potent than any sunlight. He raised his head, those dark, bright eyes fixed on me, and spoke each word with deliberate clarity, as if carving them into stone. It is not because you saved me, nor because you raised me. A pause hung in the air, heavy with unspoken emotion. Then, he continued, his voice steady and unwavering, it is because you are my mother. A sudden heat surged behind my eyes, threatening to spill over. Without a second thought, I pulled him into my embrace, my arms wrapping around him with a fierce tenderness that spoke louder than any words. All right, I whispered, my voice thick with unshed tears. Outside the window, the spring sunlight was brilliant, and willow catkins drifted through the air like scattered snowflakes, dancing in the gentle breeze. The scene was serene, yet the moment felt monumental. The bullet comments on the screen froze on that single line, refusing to scroll for a long, suspended moment. Then, one final comment appeared, lingering like a quiet conclusion. She walked out of her own splendid life, the end of the story. That concludes the first tale. Do not leave. The next story promises to be even more thrilling. My younger sister, having eloped with an outsider, returned home. To cover up the scandal, my parents offered my fiancé to her as a groom. 3 months later, by an unexpected twist of fate, I was appointed as the crown princess. On our wedding night, Ju Che stared at the bedsheets, his expression dazed, and murmured in a low, almost lost voice, How did you bleed again? A month later, I accompanied him on a visit back to my family home. My sister, her belly slightly swollen with child. Locked eyes with Ju Che, her eyes reddened, and he smashed his teacup to the ground as the porcelain shards exploded across the floor. I woke up as if from a dream. So, it turned out that my sister had eloped with Ju Che using my name. Now, she was married to another, and he had a new bride by his side. The two could never rekindle their old flame. Ju Che blamed me entirely for this cruel twist of fate. 10 years of grinding misery followed, and I withered away, dying in sorrow. When I opened my eyes again, I was back on the day my sister returned from her elopement. My parents were once again urging me to give up my fiancé. I lowered my eyes obediently. Sister and her husband are deeply in love with each other. Since that is the case, please arrange my marriage as well, all at once. 01 The tight knot between my mother's brows visibly relaxed. Schwanger, are you being sincere? Seeing my earnest expression, she gestured for me to stand up. As I shifted my knees, 1,000 tiny insects seemed to gnaw at my bones, sending a piercing numbness through my legs. This bone-deep ache confirmed to me that I had truly lived again. A bitter taste flooded my mouth. I simply nodded in agreement. Noticing my stumble, my mother made no move to help me up. Instead, she offered a relieved smile. It's best that you've come to understand. Don't worry, your mother will find you a husband even better than Zhao Huijing. Zhao Huijing was my fiancé. After my sister returned from her elopement, my parents, in an effort to hide the family shame, had thought of me. They wanted me to give my fiancé to her. After all, from the moment we were born, I had been giving things up. For her, she had snatched all the nutrients in the womb, arriving in this world plump and fair, weighing over 8 jin. I, on the other hand, was born dark, thin, and under 4 jin. That night, winter had arrived with a vengeance, and goosefeather snow fell from the sky. My mother held my sister in her arms, joyfully naming her Chu Shishua. Her heart and eyes were full of her precious pearl, and she forgot that she had given birth to another daughter. I, still unnamed, lay nearby, my lips turning blue from the cold, barely clinging to life. A month later, my father returned from a case and, seeing the frost on the window, casually gave me a name, Chu Ningxuang. The name seemed to seal our fates. One was the snow that dances with the wind like willow catkins. The other was the frost that melts into sorrow. My parents had always doted on my lively, spirited sister. Whenever she caused trouble or we quarreled, in the end, it was always my fault. The ancestral hall was cold, the blue stone slabs a constant companion to my knees as I knelt. Over and over again. 2 days ago, Chu Shishua returned home. Knowing she had committed a grave offense, she shut herself in her room for half a day, holding a secret discussion with our parents. That evening, my mother entered my boudoir, carrying a bolt of young fay-colored satin in her arms. A fawning smile on her face that I had never seen before. I recognized the fabric instantly. Many years ago, my father had been rewarded with a batch of imperial silks for his meritorious service in solving a case. That day, my parents had rarely summoned me, saying I could choose one with my sister. I had always favored peach pink and rouge shades. Just as I reached out my hand, "Sister, I like this one too." Chu Shishua snatched the bolt of satin into her arms, her chin lifted high. "Just let me have it, okay?" The satin in her arms was piled nearly to her shoulders, a small mountain of silks and brocades stacked high. A warmth stung my eyes, but catching a glimpse of my mother's familiar, ungrateful look, I swallowed all my grievances back down. Years passed, and the fabric had long since faded and gone out of style. Yet now, my mother was using this old item I had once longed for to coax me. "Schwanger, that child from the Xiao family and your sister already have feelings for each other. So," she glanced at me, then continued, "how about letting your sister marry in your place next month?" Only then did I understand her purpose. I didn't take the satin. My reward was another punishment, kneeling in the ancestral hall to confess my wrongdoings to the ancestors. I wanted to ask, what wrong had I done? It wasn't me who eloped and lost my virtue. It wasn't me who brought shame to the family name. My greatest sin in this life was probably being born into the Chu family. An unloved daughter. It wasn't that I cared about Zhao Huijing. I had no real affection for him. After all, Even he was something Chu Shishua had grown tired of and discarded to me when I was 9. Chu Shishua insisted I had stolen her hairpin. My parents, already finding me an eyesore, took the opportunity to send me away to my maternal grandmother's home in Yangju. My grandmother, pitying my loneliness, allowed me to learn the guqin. I was quiet by nature, and I truly fell in love with the strings. One spring day when I was 14, I was practicing in a waterside pavilion when someone on the opposite bank accompanied me with a xiao flute. When the piece ended, I looked up and saw a young man staring at me, entranced. He was Zhao Huijing. The next day, he boldly came looking for me. But that very year, Chu Shishua came to Yangju with our parents for a short stay. She took one look at him and was smitten. She lied, claiming that she was the one who had played in harmony with him by then. 5 years of the Jiangnan water towns had nourished me, my health had improved, and my features had matured, making me look more and more like her, so much so that outsiders could barely tell us apart. My parents used the promise of taking me back to the capital as bait to force me to yield. A man I had only seen once, how could he compare to the family affection I had never truly possessed? Without much thought, I agreed. Later, Chu Shishua found Zhao Huijing dull and boring, and she tired of him in just a few days. Only then did she tell him the truth. Zhao Huijing then turned around and asked to marry me. I didn't know that in those few short days, he had already fallen deeply in love with Chu Shishua. He settled for second best. First, to find a perfect substitute. Second, to stay closer to the one he truly loved. So in my past life, even knowing the truth, he willingly became the one to take the fall. In that previous life, I knelt in the ancestral hall for 3 days and 3 nights, crying my heart out over the unattainable family love and the love that had been toyed with from the start. In this life, I rubbed my aching knees and only looked up calmly. Mother, I want to get married at the same time as my sister. 02 The fear of lingering complications drove her forward. For the first time, my mother showed an unusual eagerness regarding my marriage, but I knew clearly there were still 3 months until that threshold from my past life. The candidates weren't set yet. No need to rush. Every matchmaking card she brought, I found fault with each time. By the 3rd refusal, my younger sister couldn't hold back any longer. She came to find me. Since my rebirth, this was the first time I had seen her. Even living again, her face still made me nauseous, and with it, my own face identical to hers filled me with the same revulsion. I feared bronze mirrors, feared the surface of water, feared anything that could reflect this face and remind me of her at this moment. Her temper was as impatient as ever. Sister, are you deliberately making things difficult? You know perfectly well that Brother Huijing never liked you. Could it be that you still harbor designs on him? I lowered my eyes, my tone flat. Sister, please watch your words. Her words hit cotton, and her expression flushed with irritation. Utterly boring. No wonder no one likes you. With that parting shot, she turned and left. Her cloud-like sleeves brushed the wind, her skirt fluttering. I stared at that dazzling back, and a wave of nausea surged in my stomach. I thought, she had won again. These past few days, I had deliberately avoided thinking about the past, but now, it came crashing down on me. I tried desperately to escape, but there was nowhere to hide. In my past life, 3 months after Chu Shishua married, when the imperial decree naming me crown princess descended from the heavens, beyond sheer terror, a secret joy suddenly stirred deep within me. This was the first time in 16 years I had a chance for my parents to look at me with respect. But that joy only lasted a month. Ju Che was initially extremely kind to me, so kind that I began to harbor unrealistic hopes, so kind that I naturally fell in love with him, and so I overlooked his occasional, nonsensical words. On our wedding night, he was gentle beyond words, yet it still hurt so much that I clenched the brocade quilt, cold sweat soaking my hair. He stared at the spot of red on the bedding, his gaze distant, murmuring softly, "How, did you bleed again?" I was bewildered, uncomprehending, but he shook his head, as if to himself, "Perhaps it's been too long since the last time." At that moment, I was groggy, only wishing to fall asleep quickly. I never delved into the secret hidden in those words. During the day I stayed by his side, head bowed, grinding ink for him. He would suddenly put down his brush, staring at my face for a long time. "Your temperament has changed so much. It wasn't like this before. He pulled me onto his lap, his fingertip lightly tracing my nose. Could it be that marriage has mellowed you? I shook my head in confusion, but he only smiled helplessly at my reserve. Later, I heard palace servants whispering he had been in an accident 3 months ago. Lost his memory, and only recently recovered, so that was it. Ju Che's strange words were just a result of his memory being out of balance. It wasn't until the day of my homecoming visit, when his eyes met Chu Shishua's, that I understood from the very beginning, everything had been wrong. The joy I had carefully cradled in my hands for a month, shattered into pieces with the crisp sound of porcelain breaking. After returning to the palace, Ju Che never looked at me of his own accord again. He believed I had usurped his beloved's identity to cling to power and wealth. After our wedding night, knowing I feared pain, he had patiently endured for that month. He relieved himself alone, afraid to cause me more discomfort. But now, whenever he was drunk, he would go mad, ordering me to be found, no matter where I was, no matter how many people were around. Like a beast out of control, he would pin me down harshly, showing no trace of tenderness. And so, the second time, the third time, each time, I bled again, as if it were the first night. The next morning he would always lift the brocade quilt with a cold face. If it weren't for your face, I wouldn't touch you at all. And so, day after day, I endured until the day Chu Shishua gave birth. At that time, I was 3 months pregnant. Ju Che's torment of me finally eased slightly the day Chu Shishua finished her postpartum confinement. My mother unexpectedly set foot in the Eastern Palace. It was the first time she had come to see me since my marriage. I instinctively touched my still flat belly, foolishly believing that because Chu Shishua had given birth, my mother might finally show some pity for the child in my womb. But she didn't even sit down. Her first words were, "Your position as crown princess was stolen from your sister. Now, it's time to return it to her." I stared at her, stunned for a long moment. I couldn't grasp her meaning. She glanced at me. "Shishua gave birth at 8 months. The child is the crown prince's. What if it's premature?" I blurted out without thinking. No sooner had the words left my mouth, a cold snort sounded behind me. Ju Che stood under the eaves, his black robe rustling in the wind, half his face hidden in shadow, a faint, obscure sneer curling at his lips. I nervously clenched my sleeve, yet still gathered my courage. It's not hard to find the truth. A blood test will confirm it. A cold wind swept by, and my mother's face paled. She snapped harshly, "The crown prince is noble and exalted. How dare you act so presumptuously?" Silence stretched on unexpectedly. Ju Che nodded. "Fine, let it be done." Everything was set, except I underestimated Chu Shishua's ruthlessness on the day of the blood test. She ran to the riverbank, cradling her swaddled infant, weeping like a pear blossom in the rain, accusing me of being consumed by jealousy and slandering her innocence. She vowed to prove herself through death. With a flourish of her sleeve, she took another step toward the raging current. Her words, if scrutinized, were full of holes, but they worked perfectly on those who loved her. So Ju Che panicked. He publicly promised to depose me from my position as crown princess. Seeing her goal achieved, Chu Shishua sobbed and relented. In her moment of triumph, she failed to notice the slippery moss. Her body tilted, and she and her child plunged into the river. When they were pulled out, both mother and child had stopped breathing. I became the murderer who drove my sister to death at Chu Shishua's funeral altar. I tugged at Ju Che's sleeve. "I've already investigated the child's matter." Chu Ningshuang, enough. He coldly shook off my hand. "Even after Shishua has left, you still have to speak ill of her. Right and wrong, are they truly worth less than your sisterly bond?" I opened my mouth. 1,000 words swallowed whole. The living can still argue over right and wrong, but the dead are forever innocent. Once again, I knelt in the mourning hall to atone for an entire night. The drizzling rain turned into a torrential downpour. The next morning at dawn, I caught a severe chill. Stumbling back to the Eastern Palace, a servant brought me a bowl of ginger soup. No sooner had I drunk it than a sharp cramp twisted in my lower abdomen, blood staining the brocade mattress crimson. When Ju Che arrived, he cast me a single, indifferent glance. "This child, you owe it to her. Consider it repayment." The midsummer rain raged on, with no sign of letting up. It mirrored my life. Damp, gloomy, and endless, I forced myself to kneel, begging Ju Che to depose me, but he gripped my chin, his eyes dark and venomous. With this face of yours, you're not going anywhere in this lifetime. He loathed me to the bone, yet he refused to let me go later. He sought out countless women who resembled Chu Shishue, some in the curve of their brows, others in their temperament. The most favored among them was the arrogant and domineering Zhao Wana. When my grandmother traveled 1,000 miles to the capital to see me, Zhao Wana blocked her at the palace gates, falsely claiming I had been beaten to death for incompetence in managing affairs. My grandmother, advanced in years, was overcome with grief and passed away that very night. No one gave me justice. I rewrote the score for the Pure Heart chant. At first, Ju Che only felt the Qin's sound was more soothing than before. Whenever he grew irritable or had a headache, he would summon me to play. He never knew what hatred lurked within those notes. Day by day, gnawing away at his mind, my pent-up sorrow was unbearable. I knew my oil was running out on his birthday. I played the final piece. The Qin's sound faded. Ju Che suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood, all 7 orifices bleeding red. I watched him collapse to the ground, then calmly lit the curtains in the hall. The roaring flames consumed everything, but they could not burn away the searing pain brought from my past life. Memory flooded back, cold sweat drenching my body. I steadied myself by a corridor bench and sat down, pinching my forearm hard. The physical pain sharpened my clarity. In this life, I would never let the tragedy repeat. 04 When my mother sent the 4th marriage proposal list, I flipped to the very last page, my fingertips pausing involuntarily. Lin Wanting, this year's new martial arts champion. Looking at the forceful strokes of his handwriting on the proposal, 2 silhouettes against the backlight from my past life flashed through my mind. I didn't think further. Lifting my brush, I wrote down my own name. Betrothal, name inquiry, auspicious divination. Everything went smoothly. 1 month later, on an auspicious day for marriage, 2 bright red bridal sedan chairs sat side by side at the main gate of the Chu residence. Drums and music filled the air, red silk fluttering everywhere. Holding my maid Xiuju's hand, I stepped onto the red carpet and slowly climbed into the sedan. Suddenly, a hand reached from behind and tugged at my bridle veil. Xiuju, quick-eyed and quick-handed, steadied me firmly, preventing the veil from slipping. Chu Shishue, failing in her attempt, lowered her voice and said, "That husband of yours is nothing but a low-born martial artist, coarse and uncouth." Seeing that I didn't respond, she continued, "How could someone like him endure your dull, silent personality? You'd better keep a close watch. Don't end up having even a mere warrior snatched away from you. That would be the biggest joke of all." I ignored her, settling steadily into the sedan. Just as the sedan began to lift, a sharp voice from outside the curtain announced an imperial decree. Chu family's daughter, Chu Ningxuang, received the decree. My breath caught. I instinctively clutched at my skirt. The 10 years of cold in the Eastern Palace from my past life sent a shiver through my entire body. I don't know how Xiuju helped me out of the sedan. All I heard was the eunuch's flat, emotionless voice. "Chu Ningxuang, of noble character and gentle virtue, she is hereby appointed as the crown princess, to enter the palace immediately and await orders." Why had this imperial decree come so much earlier? Just as I stood frozen, as if plunged into an ice pit, I caught a glimpse of my mother, kneeling beside me, nudging Chu Shishue with her elbow. Chu Shishue froze, not moving. My mother quickly removed her red veil and pressed it into Chu Shishue's hands. In an instant, the mother and daughter exchanged glances, a perfect understanding passing between them. Chu Shishue adjusted her robes, stepped forward, and bowed. "Your subject, Chu Ningxuang, receives the decree." I remained prostrate on the ground, unmoving. The suspended stone in my heart had finally fallen. Good. In this life, I would no longer have to bear this mistaken fate for them, sacrificing my own life. 05 To prevent Chu Shishue's impersonation from being exposed, the Chu family only wanted to marry me off as quickly as possible. My parents agreed to let me marry into the Lin residence as planned. As for Zhao Huijing, my parents found some excuse to dismiss him. In my past life, I had only met Lin Wanting twice, but both times were when I was on the brink of death. The first time was at the Royal Autumn Hunt. Ju Che, drunk and out of control, dragged me deep into the forest. In the struggle, my clothes tore, and I cried out in desperation, but he clamped his hand over my mouth and nose, the foul stench of alcohol on his breath. Shout again, and I'll feed you to the dogs. Just as I was about to give up, footsteps suddenly echoed through the forest under the moonlight. Lin Wanting approached, sword in hand. With a flick of his blade, he knocked away Ju Che's arm, his voice cold and hard. Your Highness, please restrain yourself. With an outsider present, Ju Che sobered up considerably. He glared at me hatefully, then stumbled away. Flicking his sleeves, Lin Wanting didn't press further. He simply removed his dark outer robe, gently draping it over my shoulders, then walked 10 paces away and stood with his back to me. All night at dawn, the dew had soaked the hem of his robe. He finally spoke softly. The Crown Prince is not a good match. How could I not know? But back then, trapped in the Eastern Palace and bound by the Chu family, where could I have fled? The second time was the day Ju Che collapsed after hearing the Qin. Flames licked at the beams. Thick smoke stung my eyes until I couldn't see. Just then, the door was kicked open. Lin Wanting burst in, wrapping me in a wet cloak and lifting me into his arms. A burning beam crashed onto his back. He grunted in pain, but his steps remained steady as a rock. His shoulders were broad and warm, his heartbeat echoing in my ear. That was the first time in my 26 years of life I had ever felt such warmth. The first time I heard a heart beating so anxiously, because of me, because of whether I would live or die. The moment he burst through the sea of flames, his voice was hoarse. Princess consort, hold on. I couldn't hold on in the end, but in that instant, I remembered him forever, 2 lifetimes, and I never even said a single word of thanks to him. Now, the wedding scale gently lifts, the veil slides softly down, red candles flicker, the halo of light is dim and warm. A familiar face, sword-like brows, starry eyes, a high-nose bridge is clearly, vividly right before me. Seeing me stunned, he doesn't rush, only gently rubs my hand. Ningxuang, he says, long time no see. I can't help but be surprised. How do you know me? He doesn't explain much, only lifts his hand to place the disguise mask over his face. I look at him, and it suddenly dawns on me, the words tumbling out, it was you. That year, after Zhao Huijing settled for me as a second choice and came to propose, my parents broke their promise of taking me back to the capital and conveniently left me in Yangzhou. Anyway, the Zhao family is in Yangzhou, so you don't need to return to the capital, and so, the Chu family's gate once again shut me out. A few months ago my grandmother fell ill, and I went up the mountain to gather herbs for her. By a mountain stream, I found 2 injured men. Their faces were plain and unremarkable, so I didn't pay attention to their features. I brought them back to my grandmother's house. Now, I realize one of them was Lin Wanting. I ask him, has the other man's eye condition healed? He replies, much better. After a pause, he adds another sentence, pity, his eyes are healed, but his heart has gone blind. I don't understand his meaning, but he says no more. The night is deep, the candles burn low, the wedding curtains fall. The pain of being pinned down by Ju Che in my past life surges back like a tide. I grip the corner of the blanket, my whole body tensing, my breath unconsciously becoming shallow. Lin Wanting notices. He doesn't come close, only lies on his side, half an arm's length away. He reaches out and gently wipes away the tears at the corner of my eye. Madam, if you're afraid, there's no need to force yourself. I'll wait. Wait until you're no longer afraid. It's not too late. He reaches out and pulls me, blanket and all, into his arms. His chest is firm, and the steady, pounding sound of his heartbeat comes through the fabric clearly. I rest against his chest, my stiff body slowly relaxing. All night long, he just holds me like that, doing nothing. In the sound of his heartbeat, I close my eyes. Since my rebirth, I've been plagued by nightmares every night, never getting a peaceful sleep. Ju Che's cold sneer, Chu Shishua's face, the sky-high flames, the bed full of blood. They take turns haunting my dreams, giving me no peace. But this night, there is nothing, only a warm, vast tranquility. 06 The spring breeze is warm, the garden full of pear blossoms like snow. I'm sitting under the eaves sketching new patterns for Shouju when the doorman hands me an invitation. I unfold the gold-flecked paper. On it is only a single line. Sister, the weather is fine today, why not come to the palace to keep me company for a chat. I know she's riding high right now and wants to find an excuse to mock me. Just as I'm struggling with what to do, Lin Wanting happens to return from duty. He glances at it and says, "Don't go." Those 4 words, said so casually, yet they feel like a lamp held out to my heart. Relying on that lamp, I, who often walk in darkness, grow a little bolder. I actually find an excuse not to go. After this day, Chu Shishue sends 3 more invitations under various pretexts. Sometimes it's flower viewing, sometimes tea tasting, and another time she says she's acquired a supposedly ancient guqin from a previous dynasty and wants me to come and offer my guidance. All 3 times, I plead illness and don't go. Twice, when Lin Wanting returns from duty, he finds me sitting alone by the window, staring into space. He lifts me out of the chair and wraps me in his arms. "Don't be afraid, even if the sky falls, I'll hold it up for you." Relying on the support he gives me, I spend many days in peace. In August, Chu Shishue gives birth to a son. The Eastern Palace is overjoyed, and a general amnesty is declared for the palace servants. The entire capital is buzzing, saying this princess consort is fortunate, having a legitimate eldest son on her first try, and that she'll likely rise in status through her child. When I hear this news, I'm filling Lin Wanting's quiver with arrows. He's changed into riding clothes, ready to go to the training camp on the outskirts of the capital. Before he leaves, he asks me, "Do you want to go back to Yangju?" How did you know? I stop what I'm doing. He smiles. "I know you miss your grandmother." I lower my head and help him fasten the quiver. "Grandmother is getting old. I want to go and stay with her for a while." He just looks at me, his gaze deep. "If you run into any trouble, send someone on a fast horse to tell me." All right. I take Xiuzhu and return to Yangju. My grandmother's house is just as it was. The swallow's nest under the eaves has new mud, and the plantain leaves in the corner of the courtyard are a dazzling green. On days when the rain is like silk, I practice the guqin in the waterside pavilion. Swallows skim the water's surface, startling ripples that shimmer like scattered gold. My grandmother sits under the eaves and watches me. "Schwanger, your complexion is much better." When she says this, her eyes hold the light of spring, very bright. I just smile, my fingers plucking the strings. "Grandmother, Ningxuang has married a very good man." I pause, stop the music, and look at her seriously. "You're getting on in years. Come live with me at the Lin family estate." In my past life, she rushed to the capital to see me, but I didn't even make it to see her one last time in this life. I just want to keep her close. Let her live out her remaining years in peace and comfort, free from illness and disaster. She stares at me steadily, her withered hand stroking my face, and gently shakes her head. "Schwanger, I've lived here my whole life. The lotus in the pond all know me. If I go to the capital, I'm afraid they'll miss me." She smiles, the corners of her eyes crinkling with fine lines. I look into her gentle but firm eyes, and I know she won't come with me. 07 A few days later, Chu Shishue returns to her family home for a visit, carrying her child. As they reach the outskirts of the capital, a ragged man suddenly rushes out. He throws himself to his knees in the middle of the road, screaming hoarsely, "Chu Shishue, you eloped with me back then, swindled me out of all my money, and ran off, and now you're the princess consort." The accompanying imperial guards immediately move to seize him, but the man clings desperately to a stone post by the roadside, refusing to let go, still shouting at the top of his lungs. "I have proof right here." The man actually pulled a yellowed letter from his chest, raising it high for all to see, written here in clear handwriting, "Shishue longs for you, wishes to depart with you." A wave of murmurs rippled through the crowd. Chu Shishue's face instantly drained of color, and the child in her arms burst into loud wails. By the time the news reached Yangju, it was already the 3rd day. Xiuzhu rushed in, breathless, pressing a letter into my hand. "Madam, an urgent letter from the capital." The letter was from Lin Ting, with only a few brief words. "The crown prince is enraged. That man has been taken into the custody. The Chu family has submitted a petition requesting a blood kinship test to prove her innocence." I folded the letter and placed it on the chin table. Outside the window, the drizzling rain had stopped without my noticing. Sunlight leaked through the gaps in the clouds, falling onto the chin strings. It was blindingly bright, making it hard to keep my eyes open. I recalled that night in my past life. At Chu Shui's funeral shrine, I had tugged on Ju Che's sleeve, uttering an unfinished sentence. I've already investigated the child's matter. He wasn't your child, nor was he Zhao Huijing's. Chu Shui had drowned in the river. Mother and child both perished. Later, when Ju Che was drunk and asleep, and Zhao Huijing was also staying in the side hall, I seized that brief window of time to test the child's blood separately. The infant's blood was incompatible with both of theirs. I wanted to tell them the truth, but Chu Shui was already dead. No one wanted to listen, no one cared, but this life, it was different. Sunlight landed on my fingertips, dust motes drifting in the light. I instructed Xiuzhu, prepare the carriage. We returned to the capital. 08. This matter had stirred up a storm across the entire city. Tea houses, wine shops, streets, and alleys. Everyone was gossiping about the crown princess eloping with another man. There was solemn and imposing, packed with people standing in dark, dense rows. Chu Shui held her child, her eyes swollen like peaches, her lips utterly bloodless. When she saw me, she abruptly stood up. Sister, have you come to watch my disgrace? I didn't answer, only looked at her calmly. Her lips trembled violently, her face shifting between pale and green. Suddenly, she spun around and rushed toward the doorway, sobbing and wailing. She screamed, I'll go jump into the river right now. I'll die to prove my innocence. It was the same old trick from my past life, but in this life, she had barely taken 2 steps before 2 figures blocked her path. Lin Wenting stood with his hands behind his back to the left of the entrance. To the right, the curtain of the side hall stirred, and Ju Che walked out slowly. Today, he wasn't wearing the crown prince's ceremonial robes, only a dark green round-collared gown, which made his face appear even more somber. Guards, his voice was cold and hard. Restrain the crown princess. The imperial guard stepped forward at his command, taking the child from Chu Shui's arms. Chu Shui struggled desperately, her hair bun falling loose. She collapsed to her knees, tears streaming like rain. Your Highness, the child really is yours, she sobbed, her whole body trembling, her voice hoarse. My first time was given to you in Yangju. Ju Che looked down at her, his face seeming to show a flicker of emotion. A furrow appeared between his brows, carrying an indescribable expression, but he didn't speak. His thin lips pressed tightly together. After a long pause, he finally lowered his voice. If you are innocent, I will restore your honor. That was Ju Che in my past life. I had been his wife for 10 years. I knew him better than anyone. His eyes couldn't tolerate a single shred of doubt, not even from the person sleeping beside him. The results of the blood kinship test came quickly. 2 bowls of clear water, placed side by side on the table. The infant's blood droplet fell into Ju Che's bowl, not merging at all, but in the bowl of the man who had blocked the street. It dissolved instantly, fusing seamlessly. A dead silence fell over the hall. Chu Shui collapsed to the ground. Limp, her mother staggered back 2 steps. Ju Che stood in the hall, his back turned to everyone. His shoulders and back were stiff, like a clay sculpture. I didn't look for long before shifting my gaze outside the window. The sky's light filtered down through the high latticework, landing on the floor. It was so bright it was almost dazzling. 09. In this life, I was finally piecing the truth together. Bit by bit. A year ago, while gathering herbs, I had found 2 severely wounded men. One of them was Lin Wenting, the other was Ju Che. They had both been wearing disguises then. I didn't know their identities, only assumed they were traveling merchants who had met with danger. Carrying them on my back, with my grandmother away, I took the risk of settling them in the side courtyard's wood shed. Lin Wenting's injuries were lighter. He recovered sooner and left first to fetch reinforcements. Ju Che, however, remained unconscious for 7 full days. The day he woke up, his eyes were still bandaged. Following the sound of my voice, he asked, "What's your name?" "My name is Chu Ning Shuang," I said. He repeated it softly, "Ning Shuang, a good name." The next day, a letter arrived from home. My parents said my younger sister had eloped with a stranger, that the family's shame must not be aired, and ordered me to return home immediately. I knew full well what scheme lay behind that letter. It was simply that one daughter had lost her virtue, and so they thought of my value again. But my grandmother was gravely ill, and her treatment required money. They were using that to threaten me. I had no other choice. I left a letter for Ju Che, instructing him on how to take his medicine, and hurriedly left young Ju. At that time, Chu Shishue, having been swindled of all her money by the man she eloped with, had fled to my grandmother's house to seek shelter. She arrived just as my grandmother and I had left. She saw the letter I had left behind after the disguise fell away. Though Ju Che was dressed in plain clothes, his appearance, bearing, and speech all exuded a nobility completely at odds with the common streets. Chu Shishue stared at him for a long moment. She began to calculate in her mind, and then, she became Chu Ning Shuang under the name Chu Ning Shuang. During the few days of her menstrual cycle, she coaxed Ju Che into consummating their relationship. A full month passed. Ju Che still couldn't remember who he was. His headaches came and went, but his memories never returned. Chu Shishue gradually lost patience. She feared exposure, and she feared ending up empty-handed. She remembered that my former fiancé had been deeply infatuated with her, and the Zhao family's status was decent enough to cover up her scandal. So she left without a word, returning to the Chu family. Thinking of all this, I stared absently through the window at the wind beneath the eaves, blowing the lanterns back and forth. I didn't notice the needle prick my fingertip, a perfect bead of blood seeping out. Lin Wen Ting wiped away the blood droplet from my fingertip, lowering his head to take it into his mouth. The warmth of his lips and tongue wrapped around my fingertip, a gentle heat spreading upward along my fingers. The moonlight spilled through the window, casting a silver sheen across the room. I didn't pull my hand back, letting him hold it, feeling the warmth of his palm against mine. Don't do these things anymore. It hurts your eyes. The mansion has embroiderers. Leave it to them. But I didn't answer that. Instead, I looked up at him, my voice soft but probing. Wanting, have you known all along? Lin Wanting froze for a moment, his fingers tightening slightly around mine. I watched him, my heart pounding in my chest, and continued, logically speaking. I never told you before that I was the daughter of the Chu family in the capital. Father's official rank was low. How could you have come to propose to me? You've been reborn, haven't you? So that was why you sent the marriage contract before the imperial decree arrived. So that was why, on our wedding night, you recognized me at a single glance. So that was why you said, my eye disease is cured, but my heart is blind. Lin Wanting didn't deny it. He looked at me for a long moment, his gaze deep and unreadable, then pulled me into his embrace, his arms wrapped around me, firm and protective. My lady, I'm sorry, I couldn't save you in our last life. I don't know how long we stayed like that. His heart beat steady against my ear, before he began to tell me the whole story. In our past life, when he brought reinforcements and took Ju Che away, I and my grandmother were no longer in Yangju. He searched for me there for a long time, but found nothing. Later, when he finally saw me again, I had already entered the Eastern Palace, one step too late, and he had missed an entire lifetime. But Ju Che didn't treat me well. Lin Wanting investigated in secret, only to discover that the crown prince had mistaken the wrong person from beginning to end. By then, Chu Shishue was already dead. He went to Ju Che to reveal the truth, but Ju Che just smiled faintly. The one who stayed with me in Yangju for a month was Shishue. I never even met Chu Ningshuang's face. How could I love her? In the end, it's all her fault. If it weren't for her, Shishue wouldn't have died. After hearing those words, a chill ran through my entire body. My breath caught in my throat. So that was it. So Ju Che had already known the truth in his past life, yet he still resented me, hated me, and Lin Wanting. Every time he saved me from danger, it was never by chance. 10. The truth was quickly uncovered by Ju Che. Chu Shishue was stripped of her title and confined to a remote, desolate chamber. The next evening, I was summoned by an imperial decree to the Eastern Palace. The furnishings inside were no different from my past life. Even the pot of orchids I watered every day was still in its place, its leaves as green as yesterday. I stared at it, lost in a daze for a moment. Everything from my past life, every single thing. It was like waking from a long dream. But now, everything had changed. Ju Che stood with his back to me by the window. Outside, dusk was heavy, the setting sun stretching the palace walls shadow long and thin. You're here. Your Highness summons your subject's wife. What is the matter? Silence stood like a wall between us. After a long moment, he turned half his body, one side of his face lit by the dying sun, the other buried in shadow. You knew all along, didn't you? Knew what? That the person you saved that day was me, I answered calmly. Your subject's wife does not know. That was the truth, about that old matter. I knew no more than he did. Juche looked at me intently, his gaze heavy. Ningxuang. The person I always wanted to marry was you. Even with a second life, I still didn't have the courage to look back at him calmly. The evening wind crept in through the crack in the window, stirring his loose strands of hair. His face was as handsome as ever, but it carried a trace of exhaustion. Your Highness, I lowered my eyes. You and I have never truly spent time together. You shared a month with my younger sister, and you had a marital bond with her. You don't have to mistake a small debt of gratitude for romantic feelings. I paused, my tone growing heavier. Besides, your subject's wife is already married to another man. He visibly swayed, reaching out to steady himself against the table, his knuckles turning white. No, he shook his head. No, Your Highness, saying this now is too late. I looked at him, the words I had held back for so long spilling out. If you truly wanted to find me, why did you not notice for an entire year that she was not the same person as me? In my past life, as soon as I entered the Eastern Palace, he noticed all sorts of inconsistencies, and in this life, a whole year of living together day and night, and he didn't catch a single flaw. Now, he turned his thoughts to me only because Chu Shishua had shamed him. He didn't want to admit that he had fallen in love with someone so despicable, so, to save face, he claimed the one he loved was me. In the end, he never had any real feelings for me. The person he loved in his heart was never me, nor perhaps even Chu Shishua. The one he loved was himself. Juche's lips moved a few times, but he couldn't find the words to defend himself. That brief hesitation was the answer. I continued, my voice flat. If you had married me in the first place, you would only have been surprised that I was different from the person you imagined, and when you learned the truth, you would only resent me, hate me. My tone was calm, as if I were merely making an unproven assumption. But I knew clearly, this was exactly what had happened in my past life. I bowed slightly. If Your Highness has nothing else, your subject's wife will take her leave. With that, I turned and walked toward the door. Behind me came the sharp sound of a teacup overturning. Then, he grabbed my wrist from behind, his grip tight. Don't go. His voice carried a hint of pleading. This isn't my fault. She was the one who made the mistake. She was the one who impersonated you, Your Highness. I struggled. Let me go. But he only tightened his hold on my wrist. You and your family committed the crime of deceiving the Emperor. Aren't you afraid of death? Those words sent a cold, absurd shiver through me. I let out a bitter laugh. Your Highness, why don't you investigate why I was impersonated? Juche stared at me blankly, his eyes dim and unclear. The force gripping my wrist slowly loosened, bit by bit. I immediately pulled my hand free without looking back. I stepped out of that door. 11 After that day, Juche ordered Chu Shishua to be brought from the cold chamber to his presence in a drunken haze. He stared at her face, so similar to mine, and suddenly let out a laugh. That face of yours, do you even deserve it? Chu Shishua had been confined for so long that her mind was already clouded. Her lips moved, repeating only two phrases. Your Highness, I gave you my first time. My sister harmed me. The more Juche listened, the angrier he grew. He grabbed her by the hair and ordered the guards to drag her away and beat her. But then, he hesitated, feeling a pang of regret for that face. The room was silent save for the crackling of charcoal in the brazier, its warmth seeping into the cold air. The candlelight flickered, casting a soft, golden glow across Lin Wanting's profile, tracing the sharp lines of his jaw, the gentle curve of his brow. I reached out, my fingertips brushing against his brow bone, feeling the slight tension there. Husband, I whispered. His voice was low, a quiet hum of acknowledgement. Today, I said, my voice barely audible. We don't have to wait. He froze, for a moment, his eyes, those eyes that were always so steady, so full of calm amusement, betrayed a flicker of uncertainty. It was the first time I had seen him so lost, so vulnerable. Then, slowly, as if afraid I might vanish, he gathered me into his arms, The bed curtains fell, a soft whisper of silk against the air. His palm covered mine, fingers intertwining. He leaned down, pressing the lightest of kisses to my forehead. "Don't be afraid," he murmured, his voice a low, soothing rumble. "It's me." A single red candle popped, a tiny spark of light blooming in the darkness. The world outside fell away, leaving only the warmth of his embrace, the steady beat of his heart against mine. Later, after his breathing had evened out into the slow rhythm of sleep, I slipped out of bed, my bare feet met the cold floor, and I padded over to the dressing table. For the first time, I had the courage to look at my reflection. The face in the mirror was calm, the eyes were peaceful. This was no longer the pale, gaunt spectre from the eastern palace of my past life. This was a woman who had chosen her own path. I opened the lowest drawer of the jewelry box, my fingers finding the hidden compartment. Inside lay a folded letter. It was short, only 3 characters. "Everything is done." This was something I had arranged shortly after marrying Lin Wanting. When I had returned to Yangju to visit my grandmother, that man who had stopped the carriage in the street, he hadn't appeared out of thin air. I had gone to Suzhou myself to find him. I gave him silver, promised him a safe retreat, and asked him to do only one thing: stand out on the day Chu Shishua returned to her family home for her visit, and Ju Che's appearance by that river. That was also my doing. I had sent him a letter with a single line: "If you truly regret it, come to the river to see me." He had gone. The moss by the riverbank had been slippery, the water had been swift. I called out to him from the opposite bank. Just as I expected, he lost his footing. No one in this world knows the secrets of the Chu family better than I do now in this life. I took my revenge with my own hands. I folded the letter once more and placed it back into the hidden compartment on the bed. Lin Wanting turned over and murmured vaguely, "Ningxuang." I walked over and lay down beside him, still half asleep. He reached his arm out and pulled me into his embrace. Outside the window, the snow had stopped falling. At some point tomorrow, the frost will settle, and I am no longer afraid of the cold. That concludes today's story. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and subscribe. If you have any suggestions, feel free to leave them in the comments. I'll see you in the next episode.